Good morning, everyone. It's 9 Mountain Time, so I'm going to get going. Um, yeah, today we're going to talk about HTTP, like the request and the response. Y'all might be tired of hearing about that by now, but it's kind of like one of these things that's vital to your understanding of like how um, the web works and how web applications are configured to work. And then we're going to have quite a bit of time for y'all to explore some new clients. Faraday's not new to y'all, but Postman might be new, and kind of see how you can interact with APIs via those tools. Yeah. Okay, so to get us started, how about some rapid fire questions? So, Galen, what is HTTP?
HTTP is a hypertext transfer protocol. I believe it's like how the request gets sent.
Totally. So it's how the request gets sent. It's you got what it stands for correct. And what does it enable us to do? Like what is HTTP's main function? Austin.
Its main function is to give us the ability for our computers to talk to each other over the internet.
Yeah, that seems about right. In how we are using it, generally, we're using some sort of client that is making a request, right, to some web server. And you can think of HTTP as the language that we have all agreed on. The client, the web server, everyone's kind of agreed, like, hey, we're going to use this. And so it allows us to now communicate over the network. Okay, cool. So, Diana, what is an API?
Oh, sorry. An API is my dog has thoughts. It's the way I see it is kind of like a non-ending like library or resources for developers to use. And the API kind of helps developers have access to all that data.
Yep, I like it. Okay. How about Michael? You got anything to add?
It's like a way for apps to present information, and also the inverse of that as well. So people can access information from other apps through the API. So it's a way to it's like a channel of sharing information specifically.
Cool. Love it. Yeah, so when I think of, and I want to distinguish, like, APIs don't have to be web APIs. They can be internal. Like, so I like the way that you're kind of like your language was somewhat vague, Mike, where it's like, oh, it's a channel, right, to like kind of like send and receive information. And so you could have internal APIs that never actually like connect to the web. And you could have, I mean, we're building web APIs in general, and we're consuming web APIs in general. But like API as a term, you could even like say like that a class that you define with certain attributes and certain methods, like that is an API, because it's like basically defining a set of rules for how you can interact with the class. And so that is kind of like, that's an interface, that's an application programming interface. So it can really relate to anything. We're going to be talking about web APIs, and that's like what we're going to focus on. Okay, cool. I think that's all I wanted to kind of get y'all talking about. Let's do some breakout rooms. So I want y'all in these breakout rooms to, you'll be in pairs. I believe. Yeah. And what I want y'all to do is you drew out the parts of you drew out the request response cycle in HTTP. You don't have to necessarily use it. I think it's a great resource if you've already done that, like, right, to use. But what I'd like for you to do is kind of like not in your own words, but practicing technical language, like tell each other what the HTTP request response cycle is, what it looks like, how it works. And then I would like for you to also be thinking about like, what are the parts that a request needs and what are the parts that a response needs? Okay, or not needs, but has. What parts does it have, like, for every request, for every response? Cool. Where's okay? Exchange with you. Okay, cool. Got these rooms set. Any questions about like what I'm asking y'all to do here? Totally okay if you have questions. You're like, what are you saying, man, about HTTP? I can't say this word, or I can't say this acronym. HTTP. It's very difficult for me. Okay, I'm gonna open these. We'll take like, I don't know, 6 minutes or so to do this discussion, and be ready to share out what you all talked about when we get back. All right, let's jump into it. I want to hear from a few groups. Andrew and Keegan, what did y'all talk about for HTTP?
Well, I think that the most interesting thing that we kind of discussed and tried to figure out was what the heck is the request body? There is the request stuff and the response stuff, and we know that the response body is just a bunch of HTML. And we kind of understood all the other stuff that was going in. There's a lot of stuff in the headers that we like. Well, we don't know all the stuff in headers because there's way too much. But when it comes to the request body, like not the response it gives you, but the request you're making, what's the body? And we kind of were figuring that it was probably the stuff that you send with a form, like you fill out a form and the HTTP kind of sends information. So I figured, well, maybe that's the request body that we're dealing with. But I don't think we were 100% sure. We were discussing it when time was up.
Totally. Yeah. So you're on the right track, is what I'll say. And the request body is optional. So that's the thing. Like, it is part of the request, but it's like optional. So it's not always going to be there.
Yeah, and that was part of the problem, because if it wasn't optional, I could have just, looked it up and said, okay, there it is. But everything I tried gave me nothing because it was optional, and everything I tried
Totally.
gave me blanks because it wasn't there.
Yeah, so you can think of it as like when we're sending, like, the body is present when we need to send a payload of data. So I'm glad you kind of like thought to like, oh, forms, that's generally we're making a post, it goes with the form, and there are like a couple of different techniques that you can use to send the body and send it kind of in basically a couple of different formats. And yeah, that's essentially what it is. But like, generally, I would say it is not present because generally we are making GET requests that don't need a body, and we're just worried about what's in the response body. Cool, but that's good things to talk about. And one thing to note is you said, hey, like, the response is, I know what that is. That's HTML. It doesn't have to be HTML. It can be, right? Like in the response body, like, and a lot of times if we're, using a browser as our client and we're interacting with generally like the majority of websites, like it will be, and it'll be rendered that way, because HTML is the kind of the language we've decided on that browsers can read, and it can be other content types, right? XML, JSON, other obscure types of content, but just wanted to point that out. Cool. Appreciate that. So Con and Wyatt, anything that y'all talked about that you want to bring up here?
I think we may have talked about the wrong thing. I was sort of diagramming out, started with the like a HTTP request, and then it ended up being more of a diagram on MVC. So I'm not really sure what to say. Yeah.
That's okay. Can I see the diagram?
Yeah. If 1 second, I have it on my e-reader and it's actually updating.
Okay, well
Sorry,
then,
it's just
yeah, no
hold on
worries.
yeah.
No worries at all. Yeah, and I don't think like you're necessarily wrong there. I think you just got like it's hard to think about like making the request and then what happens after that without like thinking MVC at this point in Rails, and like, oh well, what needs to happen to generate the response, and like that's where, you know, MVC does come into play. So you didn't do anything wrong. It's just like HTTP, the request response cycle. We could talk about it with the whole MVC principle and diagram kind of like abstracted out of our mind. Like we don't necessarily need to know all of the ways that Rails is generating that response. We just need to know that the response is generated and it always has some specific parts. Cool. Okay. I think what I want to do is have y'all drive me as we talk about the request and response parts, not necessarily the interaction between the request and the response cycle, but the parts. All right. Where are your faces? Okay, there we go. All right, cool. Zoom always takes just a second to set up. Let's think about this. So let's start with request. And I'm going to make this much bigger. And okay. So parts of the request. Anybody got a part of the request they want to tell me?
The URL.
URL. Cool.
Headers.
Headers. Great. Love it. Anything else, Jahara?
The body, but that part's optional.
Cool. All right, and now there are only 3 parts, but what I'll say is the URL, or really we should call this the URI for this specific part of the request, and it's what I'll say is like it's part of the more general part. So on this, the first part of the request, we'll say the URL, or we can think of these kind of synonymously for now, that they're going to be part of it. So what is this part called? Anybody?
Are you looking for the request line?
I am. Thank you, Jahara. So there's a couple more parts here of the request line. Anybody know what they are?
Method.
Yep. So we'll call it the verb. But yeah, method. I know what you're saying. So you could have like get, post, etc. And then there's one more part of this request line that we haven't touched on yet. Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
The version.
Yeah, version of what?
HTTP.
Totally. So we'll call it the HTTP protocol, and that's going to be like 1.1 or 2.0. So don't have to worry about this too much. This is generally like taken care of and abstracted away from you. And it's like, I looked up a bunch of stuff about like 1.1 versus 2.0 last time I taught this lesson, and I remember none of it except that I read about it on Wikipedia and I was like, oh, okay, but we don't really generally have to worry about which version we're using, but it is part of the request line every time to like let the web server know like, hey, we expect this version. Cool. Yeah, let's talk about response parts now. Anybody got a response part for me? Yeah, Brisa, go ahead.
You have the status line.
Totally. And then the status line kind of has some subparts, 2 of them. You want to give me one of them, Brisa?
Yeah, it could be like the status code, like 200, 404.
Cool. So we'll say example, a 200. Okay. And then there's one more part. I don't really care that much about this part. It's the protocol again. It's like which one we're going to use. So cool. And yeah, let's move on to another part of the response.
Body.
Body. Love it. So cool, the body. And what's an example of the body? Like what? Let's give me an example of what the body could look like.
If it was a get, it would be like where all your HTML and CSS and JavaScript lives, like whatever page you're trying to load.
Cool, I like it. And I'll put one other one, could be JSON, because this is, we're gonna get some JSON today, so I want to put it in there. And then, all right, one final part of the response also lives in the request as a hint. Yeah, Alexander.
That'd be the headers.
Headers. Yeah.
They contain a bunch of different stuff, but I think what we care about the most would be like the cookies.
Totally. Okay, cool. So I would say like what we care about the most based on the recent nature of yesterday's lesson maybe are the cookies. But like everything, every part of like the headers wouldn't be sent if they weren't important for something, like if they weren't communicating some sort of information from the server to the client and vice versa. So I'll say like content type is one that is like going to be important and that y'all are going to like be working with of like, hey, is this a text / HTML or no, is this content type actually JSON? Set cookie, you know, we saw that one yesterday. Cool. So that's that. What y'all have any questions that are coming up based on this? This is like the reason we pound this, and I was talking about this with Meg, is like this is such a common interview question. And it's like if I was starting a company and like, you know, had some junior devs that I was going to hire, this would definitely be one of my questions. I'd be like, tell me about HTTP, the request response cycle. And one of the things that you could say in response to that is like, do you want the 1 minute version, the 3 minute version, or the 10-minute version? And don't sell the 10-minute version unless you have it. So you could say maybe like, do you want the 1 minute version or the 5-minute version? And I mean, the 5-minute version would be like breaking down everything we just did, plus breaking down like how a request is sent across the internet and like what that looks like from your browser, and then how the response is generated, like an example of that, like in Rails, and how it's returned. Cool. So that's the reasoning behind here. So anything still fuzzy or you want to chat about?
I have a question.
Cool.
Is there a limit to how much data you can send over HTML? I mean, HTTP.
That is a good question. I don't know. I mean, there's got to be a limit, right? Like, yes, is the first answer that comes to mind. Do I know what it is? No. And I mean, there's always going to be like limits to how much like space and processing power like you can in basically anything that you do, but I don't know what the exact limits are. And the way that like TCP like works is like, I think it just like breaks it up into like packets and kind of keeps sending it across. So I mean, I don't know if there's like a limit.
So
I think it would just take more time is basically like the larger your body, or the larger your payload, it's like, okay, well, now this just takes a lot longer for it to be sent. But another thing you could think about is the web server might have a limit to like how much you can send at any one time, because if the web server is handling requests from multiple browsers, multiple people, multiple users, they're probably not going to let one user just like clog up their system, right? So they're probably gonna be like, nah, like you can't send all of that, because that's like that's not gonna that's just good practice to not let people do that.
And would that be, so like the example of like, if you were to download something that's a terabyte from Google Drives, Google server would have a load balancer of some sort that would then take your request. I want to download this one huge file. And instead of saying, okay, here's all my resources on the servers, like, let's go download this file. It will break that up. It will break that request up into other multiple requests. And then it would like tell the server to send those packets over. And then with the body of that response, would that just be like whatever file that is? Or can like that be flexible, or will it, or is that request even handled over HTTP?
It's definitely handled over HTTP.
Okay, gotcha.
But and it's sent back over that. But the way that Google is like making it more performant, like I don't know, probably one of the best ways that you can. But essentially, it's still just like a file, and so I don't know if there's like if they're breaking that file up across like a number of web servers and then sending it back to us and then reassembling it somehow. I doubt that, to be honest, because I don't think that's like that's not the way that I think it's happening, but I don't know for sure. So
gotcha. Thank you so much. That's super helpful.
Totally. Okay, cool. Let's take a break. Come back at 38. All right. Let's jump back in. It's 38. Give you all a second to come on back. Okay, so this is Postman. It is a wonderful tool for you to use as you're both consuming and developing APIs to visualize the data, change the way that you send payloads of data when you make requests, and I'm going to go through some of the parts of the interface that you may or may not be familiar with. So, okay, so basically every time you do a new request, it like kind of like starts a new tab up here. And so I'm using our Pets API. It's an internal API that we built, and so I have this named as Get All Pets because I have some collections over here on this left side that I have like already. What do we want to say about this? I've defined, right? I've created them, and I could create a new one here if I wanted, and this would be my new collection. You know, you can create collections, so then you can basically save requests that you've previously made to then revisit later. Cool. So anyways, so I have this like Turing Pets collection. It's got like these different endpoints that I've defined. And so here is a get one, and this is like a get all pets. So this is like, you know, visiting/pets is my URI here, right? And then my entire URL is kind of like over here to the left of it. But I've got that here. And then I've also got some options, right? I can define some query params. So I could say like, okay, like this is going to be, I'm going to also send this param of dog with the value of Frankie. And you can see it automatically generating these params right here in the URL. So that's pretty nice. A little like way to do that. If you have like some authorization that you need to like set up, you can do that here. You can define headers. It's got some predefined headers here, but those are simple key value pairs, right? That you can set as well. You can change as well, but Postman defines a few kind of up front for you as the default. We've got a body, so we can have none, which is generally the default with GET requests, but we can also send some form data. This is kind of what I was talking about when I said there's like a couple of ways that you can format the body. And so you can say, hey, this is form data, or this is like this other like form URL encoded data, or you can send it as like raw JSON, right? Like you could type it up right in here. I think that that's like basically all I'm gonna say about that, but there's like a number of ways to do it. And then I'm not gonna get into this pre-request script or tests or settings right now, but like know that this is a tool that like y'all, I don't know everything about this tool, right? I know I know enough to make it useful to me, and that's about what I would recommend you all know, is enough to make it useful for you. And what else do you want to say? So this is the request, and then this like line right here basically separates the response. All right, and so generally this would be blank to start, but I had already sent it, so I'll send it again. Takes a little bit the first time. You know, free servers on Heroku, they're not the fastest thing. They're free. So, all right, cool. So now I get this body, this response back. This is like a JSON. This is JSON data, looks like formatted as an array, which I can tell right here from this little open bracket. I can prettify it. So now, obviously, easier to read. I've got some cookies. Oh, nope, I don't. There was no set cookie header return, so no cookies exist yet. But I can see these headers that were set. These, like, it wouldn't really make that much sense for me to change these, even though they like give you the option, but it's like these already got sent as the response. So like that's what was sent back, and that's that. But content type, we kind of like talked about this one, something to very much keep in mind. And like this one indeed is sending over application JSON, and then it's defining like the character set and like what language we're going to use to read that. What else? Status line up here, the time it took, quite a while, and then the size of the response. And yeah, that's like, I mean, that's the basics of of this tool. Any questions coming up so far? And like, here's what I want you to think of this. This is a alternate client, right? Like you can use Google Chrome, you could use Safari, you can use Postman, you can use Faraday. Like, these are alternate HTTP clients for you to interact with web servers. Cool. All right, I think for the rest of the time, what we're gonna do is have y'all practice. So if I go to the lesson, I think like we've gotten enough practice in the browser, to be honest. So I think we're gonna leave this part out of like, hey, like thinking about this. But what I want to do is break up the rest of the class into like two parts. One part, the first part, like the main part, we're gonna focus on Postman because it's the most new tool to you. And then the last like maybe like 20-30 minutes we'll do some Faraday, because it's important for you all to know that like Faraday can do just about all of the same things that Postman can do, and there's just different syntax for setting all of these same things. If you need to set params, if you need to set a body, if you need to set a header in Faraday, like you can do all of the same things that you can do in Postman. You just need to know the syntax, and Faraday is obviously the one that we're going to use within the code. So that's like, the difference, the different use case there, where Postman, it's like nice GUI interface for me to interact with and test things out real quickly. Faraday, it's like, okay, I have to like get my code to consume an API, and then I need to do something with that response. Like, that is, a different use case, right? Cool. So if we go to the lesson plan, couple of things you need to know about this. We're gonna kind of like, basically, we're not going to practice making this GET request, because you get to practice it with this exercises repo. So this is the pets repo that I just hit. There are 5 endpoints to hit with I believe 4 different HTTP verbs to use. So what I want you to do first, see how far you can get with them in Postman, and we'll take like probably like 40 minutes for this. And then second, we'll do the same thing in Faraday, right? So it's like, hey, hit this endpoint, then go ahead and hit this endpoint, which is like a bit different, but you have to hit it for a specific, this is like, now let's get a specific pet. So you can see the URI has changed, and now it's pets, and then :ID. Same thing for this delete, a put, and then I think there's a post. Yeah, okay, yeah, here's the post. So things to note about this: you're all interacting with the same database. This would never happen like in general in the real world. This is just for like learning purposes. So you don't have to authenticate or authorize yourself, and you all have access to the data to change it at will. Be aware of that. So if you get a response like, hey, this ID doesn't exist, it's like, well, maybe one of the other pairing groups just deleted that ID, right? So what I'll ask you to do is don't delete. So there's some data already in there that we can see if I go back to Postman. ID of 1, 2, 3, 4 is already loaded up, and then y'all kind of like have at will to create and delete data and like edit data. I think the best way to do this is like, try not to like delete or edit IDs 1 through 4 when you do this, so that we as a class can depend on that data being there. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to put you back in the same breakout groups, and I think if you have some experience using Postman and you're like, I feel pretty good about this, you be the navigator and let the person that's like, this is a little bit new to me, I'd love to like get some practice here clicking around, let them drive. But another thing that I would say is like, go through like 2 endpoints together, like, and then switch driver navigator, and like however you want to do it. But I want both of y'all to get a chance to interact with the Postman interface is basically what I'm saying here. And yeah, that's all. Any questions? I'm gonna drop this in chat so it's easy for y'all to access. Cool. So that's the README that has like the URLs and the types of requests that you're going to be making. You're going to be making them here in Postman. Yeah, any questions? Like, open the rooms, dude. All right, cool. So let me stop sharing. There they are. All right, so I'm gonna open these up. Yeah, let's take until 10:30. We'll come back together, and actually let's come back together at like, yeah, let's come back at 10:30 and work in your break. So we'll have 40 minutes plus a break.
Cool. Looks like everyone's back. Welcome back. Yeah, I kind of want to just open it up, and anything weird or interesting or that you learned that you want to talk about. Yeah, we'll take probably like 5 minutes on this, and then I'll let y'all get to Faraday. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm right back to being completely confused about what the purpose of a request body is. It doesn't seem to be able to contain anything that we can send it. We tried using it to send information in a variety of ways. We tried all kinds of stuff, and it's like, no, we're just using the params feature. And it's like, well, what is this body for? How would I ever use this for anything?
Yeah, you can use the body to send a payload of data, essentially. And I think that probably, since you weren't able to like get it quite functional, like you just weren't, it wasn't configured exactly the way that it needed to be in Postman. And that's okay. Like, it's like, you know, that's all right. But like, that is essentially the request body is so that you can send a payload of data that is related to the request, generally like going to be like a post, a put, or a patch.
So how's it different from params?
Yeah, so params are going to be sent like, so I want you to think of like, there's a couple of ways to think about params differently, right? So query params, let me just like share real quick. Okay, query params, everything after this question mark, right? Those are like parts of those. That's a part of a request that you can define, and you can define as many as you want and send them along. Now, I was talking to Galen and Joe about this, like just because you send them along doesn't mean that the API endpoint or the controller that's receiving these params like is set up to you know, do anything with them. Like, right, like I sent this dog Frankie and like it works, it goes across, but nothing, like the params aren't used anywhere, right? And so then the other thing I want you to like, the other distinction I want to make is like query params are different than Rails params, right? When you call params in the controller or in the view in Rails, like Rails has done some work that is abstracted away from you so that you can use params in like a nice little hash that like just kind of populates with some form data that was sent over, or maybe with some query params. And it doesn't really distinguish how those params were sent over. It just gives you access to them and calls it all params. All right. So that, but the way that those were sent over, whether it was query params, form data, a raw body of the request, like those are all different. And then Rails kind of like mushes them all together into what Rails calls params to make your life easier as a developer. But those are different things, those are different entities. And like, I want you to know that those are all different. And some APIs will require you to send over a payload of data as a body. Some want it as a query param. Some want it as form data. And so those are different ways that you can send over data, but you need to know that there is a difference, although Rails kind of abstracts that away from you. Any like follow-up questions on that? All right. Yeah, I'm around again, but so for this next part, I want you to do basically what you were just doing, but in Faraday. And let me get Adam up here. So this is all you need to like get started with Faraday. You don't need a Rails app. You don't need anything but a Ruby file, right? And you have to require Faraday. I would require pry so that you can poke around, and then require JSON so that you can call json.parse. And I'm sure like y'all have used this a bit, both in mod 2 and in the project at this point. So I'm not gonna like go too deep dive in it, but there's this is where I'm gonna push you to some documentation, right? And the docs are, where are they? I think they're in here. Yeah, Faraday gem docs are in the lesson plan. And there are a number of examples of like, hey, if you're sending a post, like you have to do it this way. Here's a way to set some headers in your request. Here's a way to set the body of your payload. And like, there's a couple of different ways you can do that, but you need to look at the documentation to figure that out. And what I would do is I'd say like, maybe like get warmed up with a GET request of either get one pet or get all pets. And then I would move to like the post, and I would try to do the post because the post is going to be a little more challenging. And then I would also try and do the put. Those are the two that I would work through because they're a little bit more spicy than the other ones. But let me just show you this. This is like all you need to really get started is like, hey, require Faraday, require pry, require JSON, and then you can send a simple get to wherever you want here. But then you need to look at the docs to figure out the way that the syntax needs to be for other types of requests. Claudia, what's up?
Yeah, my partner and I worked on this, all of it already. Should we work on something else, or should we have like you come and check it or something?
Yeah, so if you have more to work on, or like additional API docs that you want to, or API consumption, if you've worked through this, then you can, there's like some other exercises that I was hoping that this would go to. I think this is just like what we're doing in class. Yeah. Okay, so two options. You can go to the ProPublica Congress API and see if you can make these like, kind of poke around, because we're going to be using that in class. So it's useful. The more that you're familiar with it, the better. And then I'll also do this. I'm going to find this like API exercises repo that I know is out there. It's just I got to search on GitHub, and I'll drop that link in the thread in the code help channel for y'all to also be able to work on. And that has like, I think like 4 or 5 different APIs that you can like go consume and practice. Cool. All right, I'm gonna open these up. We'll come back around 55 and wrap up.
Instead of sending more hits.
Yeah.
But,
what's up, Tim?
Hey, Tim.
Okay.
So we had a couple questions involving like we were just talking about Postman, and it was like the 2 things in my mind was like, one, being able to like auto generate fake data, and then you could just auto cred those actions. And the second one was what Logan and I were just talking about. If you were able to, instead of actually sending these HTTP requests, if you were able to like kind of like mock it rather than doing that and then consuming possibly hits that are going to cost money.
Totally. Yeah. So we're going to learn a decent amount about how to do that in your tests tomorrow. And like, that's like basically what you just said about like how to mock it and then consume it, or really what, and there's two ways. It's like you can either mock it or and kind of like generate, like you can hit it once in Postman, take that payload of data that you know what it looks like, put it into your test, and then like use that as like basically a stand-in as a mock. And then, or what you could do is there's this tool VCR that we'll get into tomorrow where you can basically hit it once and then it uses like a recording, a cassette of like what that data looked like and what all of the headers looked like and everything. And then it just uses that until you tell it to like, nope, go and actually hit the API again.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to explain to him, but you did a much better job.
All right. But yeah, so that's like tomorrow we're going to use that. And then what do you mean by auto generate data, auto generate CRUD? I need you to say more words on that.
Yeah. So, well, rather than auto generate CRUD, that probably doesn't make any sense. But like kind of like Faker, like faking all that, all those attributes.
Yep. And you're thinking of like, what's the scenario where you want to do that?
I guess I can't really think of one. I was wondering if that was just a possibility.
I mean, yeah, you can always fake data, right? But like the nice thing about APIs is like there's so many free ones that like you might as well just go like use one that's like live so that you get the live experience. Like I think at least like when I'm practicing, there's a ton of different ones. On the Faraday and Postman thread in 2102 backend code help, like I just posted like some exercises and there's 5 different like APIs that you can just go hit and like see the data, and they're all documented slightly differently. So they're all gonna like, you're gonna have to like hit them in slightly different ways, but like that's how I would practice. Like those are the ways I would get practice, is like actually like doing that in either Postman or Faraday so that you have like a real response that you can then interact with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the info.
Yeah,
sure. Super valuable.
Cool. I'm gonna jump to another room. Looks like Mike wants some help.
Okay, thanks.
All
right, guys.
Hey Tim.
What's up, y'all?
You said JSON.generate?
Oh no, like as like the class before that. And so .generate will be like the method, and then we can put this in param. Tim, we're just trying to send this, get a post function, but we're getting a 4 back, and we're not really too sure why. When we get the response.body, it comes back as a an empty string.
Yep.
We're following. I can send you the link, but we're just following the Lotus Island GitHub. Yeah, that one there. But then we just noticed now that in the params after the URL, the hash is actually a JSON string, it looks like. Yeah. So now we went .to JSON, but then we got, what error did we get, Evan?
I think it was this parse.
Oh, this parse thing. So we thought we could try like JSON as the constant .generate to try it just another way. But
yeah, I would try it. So like even in Pry, what you could do is like see if you can do like a JSON.generate like if you put the Pry like, I don't know, somewhere else that you can hit it, then what you can do is do like a all caps JSON. So you like require like the library .generate and then just feed it whatever the hash is that you want, and then see what that looks like. Like if it looks like, you know, a string basically with like, then it's like a string and then the hash like of key value pairs, and like with like string escape characters like kind of ugly, then like it's JSON. And then I would feed that. I would, instead of like feeding it the way that you're feeding the post there, I would define, like it's harder to read in this way. So I would like define like set the URL as a variable so that you can do .post like the URL, and then set the JSON as a variable so that then you can like send it as like it's just easier to read that way.
Gotcha. I was curious about this last part, the content type.
Yep.
when, like, some of their examples included it and some didn't. So when do you need to specify?
When you're sending JSON as part of the payload, right? Because like you
Okay.
could send form data instead,
Oh,
or you could send query params, right? But like when you're sending a body, you have to say like, hey, what type is this? It could be text, it could be HTML. Like it doesn't have to be JSON, but if you're sending it as JSON, you got to tell the server when you're sending this, like, hey, you got to expect that my body is in JSON. It's like basically telling the server how to interact with your body.
got it. Okay.
On that
Thank
note,
you.
what's the difference between a .to JSON and a JSON.generate?
Well, one is a Rails method and one is the JSON libraries method. So like I think one is like basically used, it's basically used in a way that like Rails knows what to do with it in specific instances. And then the other one is like, no, this JSON library actually converts this to raw JSON, which is what needs to be sent over in this specific request.
Awesome. Cheers. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, good questions.
Thank you. Sorry, my dog is barking a lot right now.
Very good.
All good. All right, I'm gonna pop out.
Thanks, Tim.
Absolutely.
Dismiss it too, but then you don't know how long you have left. It's like a double-edged sword.
Totally. Yeah, that's a good example of when software is not built with as much user empathy as it actually needs. Yeah, cool. Welcome back, everyone. So I want someone to walk me through. If you got the post working, please raise your hand and let me know, and walk me through what's going on in your code. Cool, Harrison, go ahead.
I think my partner has the code up and running, but because he was the driver.
Do you want me to share it? I can share it.
Yeah. Do you mind just making the atom a little bit bigger? Sweet. Okay, where should my eyes go?
Yeah, right where the cursor is. Basically, it starts the same with like a Faraday post, and then we just made it into a block. With the block variable called v, and then we set the body. It's a lot like Postman, where you can set the body to that raw data, and we just set it to a hash with the things that we wanted to post, like with the pet we wanted to create.
Got it. Okay, cool. So looks like you got a post there. You got the v.body, which you set as a hash. Then line 17 ends that block, right? That post block. And then can we put a pry right after that? All right, cool. Let's see what new pet looks like at this point. Cool. Can we do a new pet dot status? Okay, that's a good sign, right? That's something I would want to call on my response. And then let's do a new pet dot body. Cool. Let's do a JSON dot parse new pet dot body. Cool. Cool. That looks good. Looks like it came through. We get the response back of whatever the pet was that was created. Our status is 201, so we can assume things went swimmingly there. Anybody got a different one than that? Or Claudia, go ahead. You've got a question.
Yeah, mine is different, and it kind of joins in with my question. Is it better practice to do it like that way, or to just add the query in your URI?
Let's see your example.
Sure. So I don't know if y'all can see that.
Yeah, line
this
13.
Yeah, this was the one my partner and I made for this.
Yeah, so based on the readability, I would say anytime you're setting params, headers, a body, anything using Faraday, I would set it in a block because it's so much more readable, right? Like if I can see like, okay, like I can see like you send it over as params there after pets, but it's a little bit harder for me to like navigate with my eyes than it would be when it's on a new line in the block, right? So that's, I would like, my preference, there's not like a right or wrong way, to be completely honest. My preference is to see it in the block because it's so much more readable for me, and I can see like exactly like, okay, like I have this request object, and then I can like set like request.header, request.params, like however I need to within right there, like in the block.
Gotcha.
Cool. Yeah, and so it's interesting, like this, because you have a Rails API back here, you can see like one person or one pair, Harrison's pair, y'all sent it as a body, and then Claudia and her pair, they sent it as params, and Rails is, you know, flexible enough to accept both of those. Not always going to be the case. I just want y'all to be aware of that. Some are going to be more stringent and be like, hey, you got to send this as params, or you got to send this as a JSON body.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank y'all. The class survey is in the calendar link. I would love to get y'all's feedback on this class. And you have PD at 1. And then check-ins start at 2. I kind of like messed with the check-ins schedule to combine some of the check-ins. So just check and make sure like that you're okay with what that looks like. And I didn't change any of the times. And then we have one group that hasn't signed up, so please sign up. Yeah, that's all for me. Thank you all. See you later.
Wait, Tim.
What's
before
up?
we close class, can you show us how to save environment variables in like a random Ruby file so we don't have to save them inside of our zish RC file?
I would use Figaro to do that in general. It's a gem.
Do that.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna give everybody their time. But yeah, who said I'll show you how to do that?
On me right here.
Oh,
Okay,
FaceTime you,
cool.
bro.
All right, cool. Appreciate y'all. Yeah, that's all. See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Tim.
Take the class survey.